everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Visions TV. I'm your host, Karen Dahlman, and my co-host today is Jean Orlando, the Wizard of Ouija. Hey, Jean, thanks for being back with us today.
Hi, Karen. Great to see you.
Oh, it's always good to see you. Now, you guys, in this episode, as we promised, we're going to be talking about a brief history of Ouija. Now, if you missed our first episode, down below will be the links to watch that, where we actually talked about the introduction to opinions versus facts about some of the Ouija board stuff. Now, Gene has a lot to share, as I mentioned before, as he said too, he's really into the historical facts, not opinions, about the Ouija board. So this episode is really going to be about the facts. I want you guys to remember that. This is not just making stuff up. This is actually doing the research and historical records that support the beginning of Ouija board days. So Gene, where would you like to start with this?
Well, we're going to do a short history because to do a long history would take 2 hours or 3 hours just on the history alone. But I think it's important to touch some of the important aspects, the top facts. So let's do that. So Let's start with these two gals here.
Oh, yeah.
These are the Fox sisters. Now, the Fox sisters in 1848 conjured the spirit of a dead peddler in their basement and began to communicate with him. And this became excitement that just caught fire around the entire area of Hydesville, New York. And people came from miles around to see what was going on. And the way it would work is they would ask the spirit questions and the spirit would respond with knocks. So these two sisters just became an overnight sensation, and it was essentially the birth of modern spiritualism. Now, some people believe that these girls were a little less than truthful in what they were doing. In fact, they examined them closely, and there were some people that said, well, you know what? They're making these knocks with their knees and their toes. And these aren't knocks that are, coming from the walls or the ceiling or the floor or anything like that. But there were also a lot of people that said, no, these gals are genuine spirit mediums. And this whole thing just kicked off. And pretty soon you had mediums coming up everywhere. And you had home circles. And the way home circles worked would be that people would sit around a table and they would call out the alphabet, and the table would knock at the proper letter. So this is the way it would work, is you'd have maybe 4 or 5 people around the table, and then you would have a caller, and the caller would say A, and the table would knock 1. So you would know that that would be the first letter. And then they would say B, and the table wouldn't knock. So they wouldn't use that letter, and then C, and then maybe it would knock. So they would use that letter. Well, you could see what a pain that would be and how long that would take to go through. I mean, this was something that just, took hours to get messages. So they developed a much simpler method. And this is something that the Fox sisters described early on when they were doing theirs too, because with their spirit, it was the same way. It was like, well, you call out these letters and then you get these answers and you get these knocks, but it just takes too long. So they created an alphabet card. And this is basically what it looked like. So this way you could run a pencil, say, down the letters, and when you came to it, and then there was a knock, like A, then there's a knock, and then you would go like this, and then there'd be a knock over here, and then a knock over here, and a knock over here. You can see how you could then spell out messages using the alphabet card. Does that look familiar?
You guys, look at that. Can you see what that's going to become soon? It's pretty cool how this developed.
So this was in the 1850s, in the early 1850s. Well, so around the same time, in the 1850s, things were going on. Let's jump the pond really quick. So in France, we had spiritualists taking baskets like this and attaching pencils to the baskets and moving them around, doing spirit writing as a form of automatic writing. So it wasn't called the Planchette at that point, but it became the Planchette. Now, the Planchette, of course, is that movable piece across the Ouija board that we see. But the Planchette also took off on its own, and it reached the shores in the 1860s. Right.
So you guys, this is what it looked like. So this is what it became. There's like an aperture in it, as you can see, and you would stick your pencil, your writing utensils in there like this, and then you would tighten it up, And this is what the basket thing evolved into. And this is what came over to the United States. So they started creating, I would say. Look at that. Now that's an original one, you guys. This is a modern day one. Gene, what year is that one from? That's cool.
I don't know, but it's a pretty early one. So I would say probably, maybe 1870s, somewhere around there.
They came over about 1858, and so they started being used, and they were used through the Civil War time. But he's right. That's got to be at least 1870, 1868, somewhere in that era. That's wonderful.
So with the Planchette, it was amazingly popular and interesting tool. Everybody was using it. There was a craze. Literally, they were sold coast to coast. So something interesting happened here.
Voila, you guys.
The Planchette to their alphabet card and found that it was an easy way to make a pointer. So again, this looks familiar, doesn't it?
Sure does. Sure. And see, and what I always say, Gene, on that point, that's the marriage of spiritism from France or Europe with spiritualism in the United States. That's when they got married, when you brought this together with the board. You guys, how cool is that? So now we've got the East meets West. Well, that's not really East, but we got Europe meets the United States, and this is how they come together. So, all right, so let's talk about when the Ouija board came on the scene.
Okay, well, something interesting happened before the Ouija board came on the scene, and this was in 1886. In 1886, there was a craze that overtook Ohio. And basically what it was people were making these alphabet cards. They were making these things like that, and they were making little tables. And the little table essentially was a version of the Planchette, and they were using it as a parlor game. So this caught on everywhere. It took fire like it was nobody's business. People were making these things, and it was being because spiritualism at that time was coast to coast. We saw articles come out in California when they were when something happened in New York or in Chicago or in Ohio. So it was really interesting the way that this craze became popular. So everybody was making this a talking board. They called it the new Planchette.
That's right.
It was immensely popular. Right. So then after that, a couple of years later, the two enterprising people from Baltimore, Charles Kennard and Elijah Bond, came out with their first Ouija board.
You guys, I got to say something now. I'm going to jump in here because you guys know Elijah Bond, because you know that very famous gravestone. Guess what? Gene is one of the guys, along with some other members, that became the Talking Board Historical Society, that put that headstone in. So you can blame Gene for that one. So Gene, okay, so these two people got together, and what year was that when they started thinking about making Ouija boards?
Well, it was around 1890. And they claimed that they made a new board, that it had never been made before then. They claimed to invent it, which was kind of interesting given the craze just a couple of years before. I mean, obviously they were influenced by that. But regardless, they were the first to patent it and to produce it, mass produce the Ouija board. So they were essentially the originators. There's a lot that goes on there. There was also another person that was involved named Reich, who claimed to be the originator. But Charles Kennard and Elijah Bond were the ones that actually put it into production.
Now, Gene, you have one of the original boards that was before it was actually trademarked and patented. Do you want to show that board?
Right, sure. Before the Ouija board had a name.
Because this is an old board. There's not too many of these out there. Look at that.
Like yeah.
And notice too that it's double. It's two moons, you guys. It's a full moon, and then it's also a crescent moon, but laying flat, like on its side instead of like how it normally is shown. And notice another thing, you guys. It doesn't say goodbye. It says good night. That's some cool. Gene, what year is that board? Would that be 1890-ish?
This would be around 1890. Yeah.
How many of those have you guys discovered that are that are left in the world?
I think maybe 3 or 4 at this point that we found.
So you guys, you're going to be seeing while you watch us do these different episodes, you're going to be seeing some of Jean's really cool boards, old ones, rare ones, and also some really unique ones. So stay tuned for all of our episodes. Now, Jean, I think you have a story here to tell us about how the Ouija board got its name.
So that's really interesting how the Ouija got its name. You know, sometimes we wish we could look back into history and actually talk to the people that made these boards. And that is impossible. I mean, they're dead. They've been dead for years, right? But we kind of got a break with that because we found in the Baltimore Sun a letter to the editor during a discussion of the Ouija board in 1919 that describes exactly how the Ouija board got its name. Now, I could tell you, but I'm going to read it to you because the reason I'm going to read it to you is because you're actually hearing the words of Charles Kennard, who was the first maker of the Ouija board. It's the horse's mouth. It just doesn't get any better than this. So I'm going to read it to you, and you'll find out how the Ouija got its name. The name Ouija was adopted by Mr. Bond and myself. We called this board by another name until we could secure a better one. One evening, while trying the board with a Miss Peters, Mr. Bond's sister-in-law, in a large boarding house at that time on the corner of Charles and Center Streets, where Mr. Bond boarded, I remarked that we had not yet settled upon a name. And as the board had helped us in other ways, we would ask it to propose one. It spelled out Ouija. When I asked the meaning of the word, it said, good luck. Miss Peters thereupon drew upon her neck a chain which had at the end a locket on it, a figure of a woman, and at the top the word Ouija. We asked her if she had thought of the name, and she said she had not. We then adopted the word. There were present Mr. Bond, his wife, his son, Miss Peters, and myself.
Amazing. Now, Jean, I also understood that the woman in that locket, it could have been Ouida, right? Ouida?
Well, this is really interesting because Helen Peters was, quote, a strong medium, and she was into spiritualism.
That's right.
And she married a man named Nosworthy.
Yes.
And his mother was into the spiritualist scene, both here in the United States and in Europe, and knew personally Cora Hatch, who was one of the famous mediums at the time, whose spirit animal was Weena. So that was, it's a very possibility. Now, I mean, this is, again, speculation. We have fact and we have speculation, okay? There are things we know, things we don't know, and then there's speculation. So I just want to point out that the idea that it may have been Cora Hatch's picture with the name Weena on it, and Charles Kennard or Helen Peters mistook it for Ouija is a possibility. But again, speculation here.
That's speculation, but also Ouida was a famous woman. She was like what would you call her? A very progressive woman in this women's movement at the turn of the century, late 1800s. So it could have been a picture of her in there. But this, again, you guys, is speculation. We don't know. But what Jean just shared about Weena, that's very new news. That's something that he's been kind of researching more and more in the Talking Board Historical Society. Jean, that's not really out there yet.
Right. We don't think it was Ouida. We think it was Weena, and the reason for that is their connection to the spiritualist community. It just makes more sense.
Yeah. There you go, you guys. You heard something for the first time here that you've not heard anywhere else. I really appreciate dropping that nugget for us, Jean. That's awesome. All right, yeah. So we know...
Grain of salt, it's speculation.
Speculation, that's right. We don't know until we get the facts.
Getting back to, Ouija opinion and Ouija fact, it's important to separate the two.
Very good. So, Jean, okay, here we go. Here's a question for you. Is it pronounced Ouija or Ouija?
Okay, so... the word is pronounced Ouija, Ouija. But Ouija is also acceptable. You can call it Ouija if you want to. In fact, I think it was in the 60s where William Fuld, who was making the board at the time, actually put it on the box. You can call it Ouija or you can call it Ouija. So it's a colloquialism, but it's also a correct pronunciation of the board, Ouija.
And what do you typically say, Gene? Do you say Ouija or Ouija? What do you typically say?
I don't know. It depends on the day of the week.
You'll hear me saying Ouija for the most part. Because I also remember, too, there was a box that one of the Planchettes came in and they said how to pronounce the word. And they actually put the phonetic there so you could say it accurately as it was when they first made it. So you'll hear me, you guys, saying Ouija more than Ouija. But again, like Gene said, it's so much part of our pop culture now and our colloquialism that you can say either way. It's all good.
Right.
Now, you guys, join us again for the next episode, because then we will be talking about Ouija board sessions and discussing different perspectives of coming together and using this mysterious device. So until next time, you guys, happy boarding. Get out there and enjoy this really cool tool. And Gene, I look forward to talking to you again really soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.